I'm going to present our speaker, Angkasawan. His topic is uh, how hackers and scammers launder cryptocurrency and what can be done with it. Hello, everyone. Uh, this QR code is the link to my presentation. My name is Angkasawan. I investigate cryptocurrency crime. In my education, I'm OSINT analyst. I was a speaker on page days, off-zone or symptomatico. For us, for investigators, we need to understand what we work with. What is cryptocurrency? We have a P2P network, and on each of the nodes of this network, there is the same information stored and updated according to consensus algorithms. The information is our blockchain, and it is a chain of blocks, and each block is an array of transactions. Each block is linked to another block. Each block contains the hash of the previous block, and this is how this information is stored. We'll begin with Bitcoin, and we'll discuss why it is so interesting for investigators. Inside the Bitcoin transactions, there are some scripts. Actually, each transaction is a JSON file signed by our private key. Our public key is the address. Then it is decrypted, and the system confirms that you really own this money. But before doing that, somebody has to send you a transaction. Let's say I buy 0.3 BTC on a stock exchange, and I want to transfer 0.1 BTC to my friend. 0.1 BTC is sent to my friend, and 0.2 BTC is returned to me. If I want to send 0.4 BTC, I will have to find another UTXO. The nuance about the addresses was as follows. According to the BIP32 standard, an HD wallet was introduced. You understand perfectly well what you have here. If you are interested in cryptocurrency, you have a mimetic phrase from which a master key is formed, and from master key you have children keys. They form the addresses. The master key is not used for encryption. It only is used to generate the child keys. This is done for the sake of anonymity, because when we are sending something from address 1 to address 2, the change, as it were, will be coming not to address 1, but to address 3, which is not known. Of course, this is still traceable, but I will explain it a little later. Enough theory. Let's look into one investigation. You can use this QR code to get the full text of our investigation. So, we want to exchange cryptocurrency into cash, and we want to buy this cryptocurrency from this address, and to use this money in the Binance stock exchange. So what do we do? We use the blockchain explorer and look into the origin of the money. The address has 5 BTC, which was received from a different address. And we're looking to what is the origin address. And the very first hit in the Google says that this is a reported address and that the address had been reported and was under review by Scam Alert. Under the name of an American writer, scammers were stealing money from the people. So what is the progress of investigation? We are interested in 4 major points. First, the origin of monies, analysis of money flow on the address, the end receiver, OSINT, and requests for services. So we have to have the input to some exchange. And the major goal of the exchanges is to identify the stock exchanges which are used. All of these stock exchanges are open. They all work under the principle of KYC, and they store this information. As soon as they have a request from law enforcement authorities, they will immediately provide this data to them. Of course, they have much more information available to them. Fingerprinting, digital fingerprinting, and so on. Buying some drops, which is very popular on such stock exchanges, is one of most popular things. So, identifying the exchanges. The best tool that there is the MetaSleuth. It provides good visualization, and it has a very nice database on stock exchanges. In regular resources, you do not have so much information. They have their own databases, which are completely updated, and it's very convenient to use them. The second service is Wallet Explorer. It also has a very nice database, but it hasn't been updated for a year or something like this. It is also quite convenient in clusterizing the exchanges. Finally, you have classic search engines. Google can be a good hit, and be very careful in checking Bitcoin Who's Who and Bitcoin abuse forums and services. Why do you need to be careful about that? I was speaking in Moscow and I was showing an example of quite a well-known person who found a site of Syrian jihad followers who wanted some ransom for specific people. The thing is that this person analyzed the accounts, and he understood that they were sponsored by one and the same address. Then he looked into what that address was on Bitcoin abuse and similar report sites. He found one more person using this address. So he found 3 scam schemes. But this address also belonged to luno.com. People used to buy money on this exchange, and they sent money to affiliated addresses. So there is no conspiracy theories about that. Let's talk about clusterization, or uniting several addresses belonging to the same instance. We have several address formats which evolved over time. There are only 4 types like that. The Bitcoin address can start with a 1, with a 3, with BC1Q, or BC1P. It means that a wallet uses a very special kind of format. So let's say you are transferring money from your wallet to someone else, and you have the same addresses, the same format addresses, Thing is, when you receive your change, the format of the address will be the same, and you can clearly understand that the money was sent elsewhere or the money was with the same person. When the BC1Q standard was implemented, we can see that the money was indeed sent to the legacy. We see that the money was in a special stock exchange, and then it was transferred to a specific address. And we can see what stock exchange. An important topic, and a complicated one at that, is the topic of visualization. The best visualization tools and clusterization tools, they are proprietary. Crystal, Chainalysis, this is professional software, and it is not available to common people because the license costs several $1,000s. So let's be pleased with what we have and use the free alternatives. The best visualization tool is the MetaSleuth. It has a big database, it has very nice visualization capabilities, and it can show us the UTOX, and we can see where what went. Breadcrumbs is the application very similar to MetaSleuth, the only difference being that it is not free of charge, it is a paid software. It has a very nice database. Another service is the ETH-TECTIV. It is specifically focused on working with Ethereum. It supports large amounts of data, larger than MetaSleuth. And another tool, a very interesting tool, is the block path. And you can see block path on this screenshot. This is a shot of one investigation that I performed some time ago. Let's talk about the things that hackers and scammers do in order to hide all the traces. You probably heard about mixers. The most popular method of uniting several wallets is CoinJoin. CoinJoin is a common session to which people send their inputs and outputs signed with their private keys. This is sent to the web, and it is united into a multitude of transactions. So we see 3 addresses from which the money was sent to the following 6 addresses. One of the best mixers is Wasabi. You can see 300 transactions on input and 300 transactions on output. It's difficult to understand what goes where at first glance. The mixer is good in providing the same outputs. You will be able to see to which address of, well, let's say, 100 addresses the money was actually went. There is a slight vulnerability in the mixers. This is the tracing of the change. The mixers mix similar values, 8 and 27, but the outputs can be 8, 3, 7, and 9. But here you can pay attention to the fact that there is the change. The outputs are the same, and the change can be found using some mathematics. And you can subtract the mixed values from the original ones. And you will see the numbers originally present in our transaction. And this is how you know where your change went. Again, you're doing the clusterization of wallets. meaning different addresses belonging to the same entity. Now let's talk about Ethereum network.
So speaking of Ethereum, is that we everything is a lot more complex. It's a P2P network, but the difference is that on each node we have the decentralized computer, Ethereum virtual machine. It's a decentralized computer that changes the status or condition of the network. So what's the point? Point is that in addition to transaction database in the blockchain, we write the so-called condition or the status. So for you to understand, we have the addresses. Everything is broken down into addresses, which we have in crypto, and each one has its own condition, i.e. balance, ETH balance, the calls, the bytecode, and repository or the storage. When you send the address for which there is no smart contract repository, then this means it belongs to a person. So the money would be received, and the person will be able to dispose of the money as they see fit. But we have the so-called smart contracts, and then when you send a transaction to that address, then the virtual, so-called Ethereum virtual machine executes that bytecode, which belongs to that address. So the most important tool, analytics tool for Ethereum, is the so-called EtherScan. This tool is the best tool. No analogs exist, and so the important aspect is that in it, a great number of exchanges are recorded in it. All of the contracts are signed and undersigned, and it also gives you the so-called ENS, which is the Ethereum name service, which is an analog of DNS, domain name service. So you can attach or assign a certain nickname to your address. So what is it done for? This is for convenience, so that you don't have to copy the addresses all the time. If that person says it's my address, then that person will be easily identifiable by using the address. Of course, there's a downside, and there's a vulnerability to this, in that we have the so-called async, which is we have async. So we have OSINT, and we have the tools for searching by nickname. So the best one, of course, is the tool called Magret tool, written in Sexoy. It uses 3,000 forms and sites in terms of that searches for that address. Number 2 is OpenSea.io. What is OpenSea? It's an exchange for it's an NFT exchange. In more detail, each nickname is in fact a token, and so what people by nature, they use either the same or similar ones, and they tend to place it into other networks. So OpenSea is there to enable us to find addresses of one and the same person on other blockchains, because in OpenSea you will potentially end up with a host of tokens in other networks like Arbitrum, Binance, etc. Number 3 is, of course, just Google search. So you Google up and you Google Google in the nickname, and potentially you'll end up with something. And last, but not least, not many people know about this. It worked once. It's called Mailcat tool. What does the tool do? You input the nickname, and it checks the most popular domain names for presence, for availability of that particular address. So my research, my investigation was based on this. I talked about this in Madrid, about the symptoms using this Mailcat tool. We ran the analysis of transactions. We identified who indeed the address belonged to, identified it by nickname, and using this tool, we identified a Mail.ru address, which was tied to, that nickname. And we ended up with a photograph of that person. Next important topic, is the so-called L2 or Layer 2 blockchains. I'll tell you a bit. I'll talk a bit about the mechanics. So each block is then created once every 10 seconds, for example. So we create it once every 10 seconds, but there's limitation as to the block size. Of course, people want more people to use it more faster. So then this was the rationale behind creating L2s, L2 blockchains. So they collect transactions. It's just the same blockchain, but the difference is that they gather transactions into one cache, and then they send it to the main Ethereum, the L1. So each and every transaction executed. So the hash condition is stored on Ethereum itself. So therefore, we scaled Ethereum, and we make it using our very own terms and conditions. So why am I talking about this? The thing is, we can actually we can relay, we can send transactions from one blockchain to another. So what tools do we have? Of course, we got the Thorchain, we got multi-chain. So they use a similar principle, which is they're decentralized networks, and they have their own blockchain addresses. So when you send your assets from that, so that decentralized network receives it and it signs it in Thorchain the way you want it. So tracking is a difficulty here. I've never seen anyone talk about this. People don't even know about this, even experts. So, so what thought vector do we use? To begin with, we have to analyze a transaction. Like your answer is here to see. So this was a transaction sent in Thorchain to Bitcoin. Bitcoin was sent to a Thorchain address. And so in that transaction, one could look up and see that in metadata we have Ethereum, and so $400 was sent. So we take the address, we'll look up that one on Ethereum, and we find the same transaction done at the same time, so we keep on tracking. So the next example is a multi-chain. Bridge. So we find an Arbitrum, and in Etherscan we see that funds were sent to assets were sent to multi-chain in the amount of $18,000. What do we have to do here? We can look up transaction metadata, i.e. call data, because it's then sent to smart contract, and it converts processes it with a smart code, and then we look up the log, transaction log. When it executes smart contract, it sends its events to the network, the events. So these events can be looked at, and upon completion, it says that he received the assets, the funds, and it would report the event in a specific format. And in any bridge, you'll see the same situation. This will be the token address, the initial, the source address, the target address, the amount, and most important, the network, and from which network and to which network. So we analyzed it, we looked it up, and we realized this was 420 some big number, and so this was it yielded nothing. We didn't know the network, so we went on to look up multi-chain documentation, to analyze it and to understand that the from was Arbitrum and to was the Ethereum, which was logical. So we now go to Ethereum, and before that we look up the address 2, because it may vary, it may be different. And then we go to Ethereum. Following this address, we go to the network and the logs, which was shown in the logs. We end up with the same transaction, 18,008 USDT was sent to that address. And then we went on with the investigation. In most cases, you don't necessarily have to do it because you have a great tool called Archive Intelligence. What it does is, for one and the same address, it monitors the balances and the transactions that take place for various networks, in Optimism, Arbitrum, etc. Because people mostly send funds to their own addresses in other blockchains. And so using this tool, you can trace the transactions. There are special tracing tools and tracking tools. There are no special tools to analyze transactions between bridges. And now let's move on to the most interesting part, We have one entry point and one exit point in Ethereum. We cannot merge anything. We cannot connect. We cannot create 300 entry points. So we have to find a way out. But there's such a thing called Tornado Cash. Especially if you follow the news, you may have heard that the developer of this Tornado Cash service was jailed, was put imprisoned. There was an unfortunate event that took place. The SEC prohibited the use of Tornado Cash. So how does it work? And what is it? It's based on the so-called zero knowledge proof protocol, or it's called ZK Snark protocol specifically. How does it work? A hacker sends, let's say, 1 ETH gross, and it says hashing. It generates the task initially and the problem and the solution. Solves the problem to the Tornado Cash address, and it just waits for a few days, for example, and afterwards the solution that it had or they had sends it back to that same smart contract, and it returns. This is the so-called zero knowledge proof based on elliptic line principle. So there's no method currently to hack it, and sometimes it can be done because there's such a service called Tutelo XYZ, contains database, and it monitors the anonymized transactions done via Tornado Cash. So sometimes you're able to identify it. Most of these are most likely jokes because from one and the same address they sent and received funds, which is not the point. Case in point. But there's an interesting method called unique gas price, right? So in Bitcoin and Ethereum, you can specify the so-called fee. In Ethereum, it's called gas fee, right? So many people, jokers, they put 1, then it changed the value by default, and then they forget to cancel it. And so that fee is a unique one. So first you send the transaction with a unique one, and then you receive it back, and so thus you can connect the two. Another one option is the related addresses. It's a meta tool where you send funds from one address, then you receive funds from Ethereum. But these two addresses were connected via several other transactions, or something like this, which has nothing to do with anonymity. On the other hand, I must say that, in fact, based on my experience in investigation on Ethereum, people mostly receive cash from Tornado Cash, then they hack, and they move it to Tornado Cash back. So all it takes is 3 transactions, and then deploy the smart contracts. So 4 transactions, and you cannot do anything with it. There are the so-called anonymous cryptocurrencies, i.e. Monero, that uses the crypto node. It mixes the inputs and outputs, and then it encrypts it the way that you cannot understand what was sent. In fact, and it's all done cryptographically. So Zcash, it uses the same algorithm as Tornado Cash, zero knowledge proof, and the other one is called Dash or Dashcoin. Uses virtually the same ones. Mostly, it's the Bitcoin that gets mixed in all of these transactions. So what do we do with anonymous cryptocurrencies? This is how it looks. So the price is 0. We have no inputs. We have no outputs. And we don't know the numbers of the persons undersigned. And public keys don't tell us anything because we cannot look up where the funds were sent afterwards. So unfortunately, you cannot do much or anything about it virtually. So another interesting aspect that researchers or the security investigators talk about is the so-called AP interception, i.e., this is logical. We have a P2P network. This is a Bitcoin network, and someone sends a transaction, so that person has to connect with that network, at least with one of the nodes. So they provide the IP address, so you can intercept logically. You can look it up, but in 90% of cases, it will not work because even if we intercept anything, because all of these anonymous wallets used in their own software, they use the so-called Onion or the Tor protocol to obscure they use the so-called onion routing or the Tor, so it doesn't work. So professionals will work using this method. Of course, there are certain nuances unrelated with this. So Monero, zero knowledge proof snark. We have Tornado Cash, which is based on this zero knowledge proof protocol. Zcash, which is also based on this proof, and all of the cryptography and Bitcoin and Ethereum is the elliptical curve cryptography is not based on. It is based on elliptical cryptography. What's the point here? Point is that elliptic cryptography is not susceptible, is not resistant to quantum computing. So sooner or later, it will be hacked by quantum computing. So hopefully 20 years from now, it will be able to decrypt most of the, or all of the Ethereum and blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain. They use the same cryptography, and to see who belonged the initial addresses, for example. And we'll be able to try to send these transactions to the non-existent blockchains by that point. But all these anonymization methods will be sooner or later hacked, and sooner or later it will be disclosed. And so no matter how long we tend to keep it private and anonymous, it'll be resolved over time. So thank you for your attention. So you can, if you're interested in cryptocurrency investigations or information security in general, you can look up my channel. And yeah, so here are the QR codes. Any questions? Thank you. Here's the question. What advice can you give to cryptocurrency users, those that have Bitcoin wallets? How do we make sure, how do we keep our holdings secure, our assets secure? Do you see the QR code? I have an article about cryptocurrency scams where I explain how to avoid. And so one of the community members, an officer, has an article where he talks about it. He talks more about anonymity. I explain what you need to do, your steps, if you receive an email from someone who offers you to buy some Bitcoin or whatever. So so I give practical advice as to avoiding these things. There's KYC that you also have to adhere to. What trends can they be when it comes to the new? So what are the possible scam protection evolution? What's the scam protection evolution? It's a good question. Well, what I do is I investigate crimes and scams. But in my article, it was based on a lecture for the Higher School of Economics. Maybe based on that article, you can draw some. Get some knowledge and to try and foresee some new schemes, new scams, etc. Normally, they're not based on purely technical aspects. It's mostly social engineering, which will always be the case, which will always be a pressing issue. Well, thank you for your presentation. My question is, hypothetically, if a hacker does everything right, or good, and it withdraws crypto for you to maximize the difficulty of investigation, so to what extent, what is the degree of probability for you to catch that guy if he's not a novice, and if that hacker is good? I'm an independent researcher. I'm an independent investigator. I can help law enforcement authorities, but I'm not an officer. So I can tell them, well, go here and there to these exchanges, to these DEXs or SEXs. Most likely, the data is there, the hacker data, and so they do it themselves. I don't do the job. I don't do the catching job. It's important to realize. So when you try and catch a scammer, or a hacker by yourself, most likely it's the people that are not quite into the topic. On the other hand, when it comes to major investigations, it's up to the law enforcement officers. Heck, maybe you read the news that Akira group has to do with a certain hacks. So when they use the so-called money laundering schemes, they use the same addresses. So that's the way that you catch them. So you can connect to different, you can associate different groups, hacker groups, and understand how they are related. Well, thank you very much.